Hibernia played a unique role in the history of Rome. For many years it was the northwestern corner of the Republic. As Rome grew toward the Arctic, Hibernia would be key in protecting the Northern Isles. Soon many seaports were built for the brand new fleet, Classis Hibernia. The main seaport and capital of the province would be Carausium. It was built around a defensible harbor on the southern shore of the island, ideal for maintaining trade with the rest of the Republic. After the discovery of Jovian crystals in Britannia, Hibernia would also be quickly mechanized in the immediate aftermath. Every seaport was expanded upward as the new aero classes took to the skies. It was fortuitous to keep the two close together, as it required a lot of power to maintain flight. In most occasions, seaworthy vessels were still the economical way to move large quantities of goods. Mechanization also greatly increased the size of sea ships. Following centuries of such growth, the Gales of the Emerald Isle would play a large part in our history, at the helms of vessels large and small. One Gale in particular was Aoife MacGlaisin. Alright, next profile. I will move on to our Navigator. Aoife MacGlaisin is a Gaelic woman, tallest among the women in our contus at 70 uncia. She has sharp emerald green eyes set against almost ghostly white skin. I'm reminded of an old observation that because Sol's light shines so rarely that far north, he blessed the people that lived up there with fiery red hair. Definitely true in this case as well. A generous dusting of freckles cover much of her face and shoulders, like ashes floating down from the embers. She wears her hair loose, reaching down just below her shoulders. Much of it drapes down in front of her ears, though, and I'm surprised it doesn't compromise her vision while flying. Even without her helmet, she handles the corvus expertly. Every navigator of a contus is selected from their local classes, in our case, Classis Germanica. The home port is in Haemonia, and it was in the following weeks I began to learn about Aoife's relationship with the shipmaster there. Sophia helped fill in some of the gaps of information from MacGlaisin's rants. It seems once you reach the rank of Triarch, you qualify to be assigned a permanent ship which you can use full-time, on missions or personal travel. This possession allows for a lot more customization and is often preferred by the classicus because they can become much more familiar with all the subtleties in the ship's function. Plus, that sense of ownership encourages them to take better care of their vessels. I would have assumed this to be standard procedure, but I'm not too familiar with the inner workings of the classes. At least among the aero classes, it is apparently easier to move sailors around than whole ships. When I apprenticed under Envoy Kaja, I never had the experience of living or flying aboard a dedicated ship. Most officers who advance that high often see themselves as too good to assist the Ministerium. They're more likely to travel the distant edges of the Republic where they could be first into a fight should one arise. Despite all this, our navigator, Aoife, was promoted to Triarch MacGlaisin last year, but wished to retain her commission with Contus Germanica 7. Classis Germanica, or more specifically, the shipmaster of Haemonia, took this as an insult. After being trained for years among the sailors, and then privileged with such a rank, to decide to remain in service to the Ministerium was seen as ungrateful. Unfortunately, the shipmaster is not alone in seeing it that way. Since then, he has repeatedly denied her request for a permanent ship. Whenever at Homeport, she would be assigned to the oldest or worst of the available vessels. It is a damnable shame, in my opinion. Okay, this should be ready now.
Do you really need me to talk? Isn't this yearbook?
I mean, yes, there will be a print version, but we always have duplicates in crystal along with the voice recordings and translations for...
Alright. Make it quick.
Can you state your title and name?
Navigator Aoife MacGlaisin.
How long have you been a member of Contus Germanica 7?
Might as well cut my hand off and count the rings. 13 years.
So you were quite young, just out of the academy classes.
Aye.
Why did you choose a contus over serving in the classes full time?
Why would I want to cower at the gates like a frightened little lamb? At least with you lot, I can actually make a difference out there. I don't spend every hour of the day flicking the prick of the next arse in line trying to earn a comfier chair.
Right.
We done now?
One last question. I'm sorry, it's like a standard form.
Fine.
Do you have any advice for me going forward?
Yeah. Don't ask so many questions.
She's rough around the edges, but honestly, considering the stories that Sophia has told me, she could be a whole lot worse. Aoife came to Germania after the death of her father, the last family she had left, so to speak. He was the last family member she genuinely cared about. To be treated in such a way by Classis Germanica simply for the career path she chose is quite un-Roman in my opinion. She's a citizen like the rest of us, and an accomplished one at that. It's no wonder she would want little to do with them. I'm surprised she is not transferred to a different province altogether. My first time meeting with her was not by sight so much as sound. Her voice carries like wind roaring through the Alps. Fortunately for me, she was in a pleasant mood, singing like a songbird. I didn't recognize the words, I believe they were in her native Gaelic tongue, but the melody was quite pretty. Sophia Trachis was taking me around the castrum, introducing me to everyone. After a brief introduction to the Decanus, she led me to the north wall of the fortress into the garden. We passed a few of the cooks picking herbs for the night's meals when we heard the song. She was lying on the grass, watching the sun as it set over the western wall. When she noticed us, she gave Sophia a cross look, as though she had spoiled a secret. I found it amusing, considering the singing. She seems to often underestimate how far her voice carries. Even still, her greeting was pleasant enough, though she did not get up to take my arm. Her position did seem quite comfortable on the small hill. As Sophia led me away, we could hear the song drift upward once more. At her rank, MacGlaisin is rated for vessels of almost every size. Occasionally, she is called aside from her normal duties to perform some basic function for the Classis. One of our expeditions had to be modified because of this. She received orders to deliver an Aeronus freighter to one of the smaller mining settlements in Slovenia. Often when an Aeroclassis ship is decommissioned, it is refitted for use of moving domestic cargo. Luckily, Elder Randolph was able to find us a task in Charkovia, so the trip would not be as disruptive as Classis Germanica may have hoped. So we all joined MacGlaisin on her journey to the eastern frontier. The vessel she would be delivering used to be an Ignavis-class warship. They're like floating arsenals, 250 cubits long from nose to tail, and full of enough incendiaries to burn a city to ashes. It was quite surreal seeing the interior hollowed out as it was. It would be plenty of room for the 10 of us. That morning we reached the south field where the larger ships are anchored, and proceeded up the gangway to the main deck. Aoife was already aboard, checking over the controls in the main flight deck. As a cargo vessel, it was a lot more simple to operate than a warship, but still required a skeleton crew of at least 8. It was then that I realized that our contus had effectively been placed on a double mission. Once gathered around the helm, MacGlaisin began giving assignments. The speculatores were sent back to the engine room to assist Sophia, then Chung and Nucci were sent to the port and starboard watchtowers. That is when she turned to me. "You said your father was a map maker, right?" I was surprised she remembered such a passing detail, but I nodded. So she put me to task, ironically, in navigation. She stood me at the map console where beams of gold light shone between the emitters, drawing a three-dimensional map of our surroundings. The very center of the display had the outline of the ship sitting at ground level. Aoife then turned to DeFleur and said, "Would you mind?" "No, of course," Faye answered, then disappeared through a doorway. She'd be stationed at the stern watchtower. Once everyone was checked in, Aoife spoke through the clarion. "We have a long flight ahead of us, but we should be there before sundown, so get comfortable." She sat straight up in the captain's chair, then informed Sophia to start the dynamo. A massive thud shuddered through the ship, and we could hear vibrations all around us. That is when I heard Aoife softly begin to sing. It was always the same particular ballad she would sing when starting up a ship, especially before passing through the ostium into a foreign realm.
So long the light of morning sun, so close the coming storm, so brave our hearts to still sail on, until we sail no more.
She then deftly manipulated levers, pulling the massive vessel up into the air, before bending the helm forward, sending us soaring through the clear blue sky. I'd never experienced a machine of such size moving so quickly. In a mere 9 hours, we crossed half the continent. We then set down in the mining settlement, where we would stay the night before taking an Aerochatus to Charkovia. I can say for certain that I'm confident in our safety with her at the helm. Signed, Ulysses Adelbrecht, Envoy, Contus Germanica 7, 4 Augustus 2403. Aoife was not someone who could be easily forgotten, but nothing echoes in the halls of my mind like her voice and melody. It would help lift us up even in the darkest times.